I snuck out of the barracks that night, like called my dad from a payphone and was like, "Yo, I don't care who you got to call, get me the fuck out of here, but you know, get me out of this." And he said, "You signed up for it, you ride it."
I'm Daniel Bell.
And I'm Patrick Brennan.
This is AfterSOF.
Today's guest, we had on Brad Thomas, who is a former CAG operator, Delta Force guy, and now is a rock star.
Yes, so he started off in the Rangers and moved through to retire from Delta. He's gotten into music, and he's supporting a lot of different things, but the primary thing he's supporting through his music is Warrior's Heart, which we're very familiar with it being here in San Antonio.
Yeah, it was a great interview, and we'll be releasing some of his music and promoting that, but enjoy the show.
Enjoy.
I didn't really have a huge desire to join the military. It wasn't something that came to me, as a little kid. My dad is a PhD doctor, and for maybe for excitement, maybe for his release, whatever he needed it to be, he was a volunteer fire captain. And I grew up, my earliest memories were like in the firehouse, in and around the apparatus. My favorite show on TV was Emergency, which just rocked. And, I wanted to be a fireman. That was one of my first memories was just firehouse, hook and ladder truck, that whole thing. And I guess about the time that I graduated high school in 87, I went to the fire department where he had finished his career as a volunteer captain, and talked with some of the guys that still, that knew him and everything else, and said, "Hey, what do I need to do to join?" And they were like, "Dude, you're the wrong color and you're the wrong gender and you're never going to get a job here." And it was kind of like, man, what the fuck do I do now? Um, I was playing music, and I had, started playing music at a very young age, and that was also a huge part of who I was. And, some of my earliest memories would be making up songs about the firehouse and, those types of things. Always had a musical ear and was inclined to play, bang on a piano, whatever it might be. My parents exposed me to music at a very early age, live music at a very early age. And that was something that probably pulled me in a little bit harder than the fire department did. But anyway, the end of the 80s, December of 89 specifically, there were three events that happened that kind of really set me on the journey. The band that I was in just kind of started to fall apart, and you realize, man, it takes a lot to get the right people. And if you look at almost any band, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Metallica, whomever, like half the band isn't original. It's, this was their second or third drummer. This was their second or third whatever it might be. All the big ones even, right? AC/DC, second singer, different drummers in and out and things like that. Anyway, the band I was in just kind of started to fall apart, and it's kind of, man, I'm 21 years of age. Do I spend the next 2 to 3 years trying to rebuild this in hopes that maybe we get the right people? And that was kind of a daunting thought. So December of 89, that happened. The second thing that happened was a buddy of mine had joined the Air Force. He was the only dude that I knew that was in the military. And he had gone to basic training in AIT, and he was an EOD guy. And he came back from, I think, AIT for Christmas vacation or something like that. And he was talking about some guys that came at the end of his basic training class that were recruiting for a special unit that jumped in behind enemy lines to rescue down pilots. And I was like, it just kind of like scratched the itch a little bit. And the third thing that happened was the Rangers invaded Panama.
Yeah.
And there was very little of it on TV, but I remember being at other guitar players' house, and we were trying to write some music and things like that. And seeing it, we were drinking beers, and it was like, man, that's cool stuff. So probably by January or February of '90, I kind of made up my mind to like, okay, I'm going to go talk with the recruiters and see what this is all about. And that's really kind of how it started.
So yeah,
Wow. Yeah.
so you went down to the Army recruiter because things were not what you thought they would be with the music, and then you saw the cool guy aspect.
Yeah, I think looking back on it, I think what I was attracted to was the camaraderie that I witnessed between my dad and his coworkers at the firehouse. And even shows like Emergency that I was enamored with and still watch. Even shows like that, it was all about the camaraderie of like Johnny and Roy and them going into danger and trusting each other and all of that. And I think that had way more of an impact. I couldn't have put that into words, when I was 17, 18, 19. I couldn't even have thought that, but it definitely had an impact on me. So I originally went to the Air Force recruiter because my buddy was in the Air Force. And the guy gave me the runaround for the better part of like 2-3 months and told me, straight up lied to me, like, oh, I'll get you a contract, just sign on the dotted line, and then we'll get you a contract to try out for the special tactics guys or whatever. And I didn't even understand, any of what it meant. And one day I was frustrated leaving the Air Force recruiter, and the Army guy was standing there, and he was like, hey man, what the hell are you doing? You're here like every week. And, what is it you got going on? And I was like, well, that guy's lying to me, and he won't give me a contract. And he goes, well, I can give you a contract. Okay. He goes, what do you want to do? And I go, I don't know, like Delta Force. And he goes, whoa, you can't do that. You got to do something first, like Special Forces. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. And he goes, well, you can't do that either. You got to do something before that, like a Ranger. And I was like, all right, cool. So he put a VHS tape in the machine and played this like cheesy, shitty video of Ranger School. It wasn't even like real Rangers or anything, but Ranger School stuff. And it was like, oh, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I'll do that. So that was how the evolution really started. So I think by May of '90, I had enlisted, and it was on the delayed enlistment program. And I didn't get in until November of '90.
But you got in under a Ranger contract? Okay.
Yeah. And interestingly, like I didn't know any of that stuff. I mean, I was a complete moron when it came to anything military. I didn't even know what the Ranger contract was. I didn't understand, oh, you're going to go to airborne school and then you're going to go to the Ranger indoctrination. I didn't even really care. It was just like, all right, I'm going to go be a Ranger. This is what I'm going to do. And so it wasn't until I kind of got the basic training where I ran into other guys that were in a similar situation, and they had a lot more information than I did, or maybe they had a relative that was in and kind of explained it a little bit better. But I literally had no idea what I was getting into.
That's wild. Yeah.
Patrick's an X-ray,
Yeah.
so he came in knowing he was going into the Special Forces, and
Yeah. One of the glorious bastards, right? The bastard children of Special Forces.
yeah.
Man, that is so cool. We actually just interviewed a guy last week that was pararescue, enlisted, I guess, late 80s.
Yeah, well,
early
he did a stint in the 82nd, a short enlistment in the
that's
82nd,
right. Yeah.
and then he became a PJ and then got out as a crow.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah,
So just seeing the path that everybody takes, you're like, why did they end up doing that? And then it makes a lot of sense once you start hearing their story.
Yeah, but I think that camaraderie piece of it is probably something that would be pretty universal, right? Like, I mean, I was a young guy, right? So I played a lot of football in high school, got out, and that was certainly a piece that was missing, right? The physicality and the camaraderie. And I had a Ranger contract when I went in, but I had the intention of trying to get SF in basic. So
Okay.
I switched my contract in basic, but yeah.
To get that X-ray.
Right, yeah. That's interesting. So, like, what was that like back then, right? You're going through basic and infantry school and then airborne school and then you went straight to RIP. Like, where did you grow up? Let me ask you that. Was it?
So I grew up in Montgomery County, Maryland,
Okay.
and north side of DC, super nice suburban area. Was pretty well to do, and my family was family life was great. Like, I had the ideal childhood and everything else. So that's one of the things that probably plays into later events. But like, I feel like I don't have any childhood trauma or any of that. And a lot of guys, that have PTSD things, they said that there's a lot that carries over from just things from childhood. And so I feel super fortunate that I grew up the way that I did and had the family dynamic that I had. It certainly helped me. But grew up there. So interestingly, when I was in basic training, I don't think that I had started AIT yet, but one day they gathered the entire, like, every motherfucker on Sand Hill in Fort Benning that was in basic training. They rounded up and they put us on this parade field, and the lieutenant colonel or full bird colonel, I don't remember, came out and he said, there's a war that's going to be happening in Iraq, and your contract, whether you got one or not, doesn't matter. It's needs of the Army, and every one of you guys is going to be 11 Mike now, which was like
Mike.
And I was like, whoa, dude, I didn't sign up for that crap. Like, I'm not going to ride around the back of a Bradley. That's not what I wanted to do. It's not. I had no desire to do that.
It's no fun. It is not fun. I was a medic in a mech infantry unit. It is not fun.
Yeah. So I snuck out of the barracks that night and, like, called my dad from the payphone and was like, yo, I don't care who you got to call. Get me the fuck out of here. But, get me out of this. And he said, you signed up for it, you ride it. So that was it. There was no help there. And within a day or two, one of the drill sergeants gathered, there were like 12 of us in our company that had Ranger contracts. And he gathered us together and he said, hey, it doesn't matter what that guy said. You guys are all still going to airborne school after AIT and then going to the Ranger indoctrination program if you make it through airborne school. So that was kind of like a huge relief. But yeah, no joke. Literally, the entire Sand Hill got changed. If you were unassigned, all the dudes that came in, like 11 X-ray and things like that, they got bonuses, which I didn't get. So I got no bonus for coming in with an option 40 contract. But I felt like I got screwed when I got the basic, because all these guys are like, yeah, I got 15 grand for 11 X-ray, and all I got to do is volunteer, and I can go to airborne school. I was like, my recruiter, fuck me, that guy. And then as soon as that event happened, I was like, man, thank God I got a contract.
Yeah.
But that's basically how it rolled. So I went from there, did airborne school, and then went to the Ranger indoctrination program.
How did they select you? Because you went to 3rd Battalion, right?
Yeah.
How did they? Was that just a random assignment, or how did that play out?
Maybe this will take you back to early in your time in the service, but like, you remember everything was like rumor.
Yes.
Like, you rarely got any direct, factual information from leadership. At least I didn't. So the rumor was that you could pick which battalion you got to go to. But the rumor was also that they went in alphabetical order. And my last name starting with T, I figured I'd be pretty low on the list. And the rumor was that they would get you to the battalion that you picked until one of them filled up. And then they would just start randomly assigning dudes to whatever battalion. And so I figured I wanted to go to 1st Ranger Battalion just because I like the beach, grew up going to the beach, wanted to be on the coast, wanted to be, close to that. I wanted to go there, but I figured everybody wants to go there except for dudes that are from the West Coast. So by the time they get to T, they're probably going to be filled up. And I don't want to get stuck across the country in Washington State. I would rather pick where I go. And I think also, too, like, I was tired of living out of a duffel bag, And I graduated from airborne school late on Friday, like finished, got my last jump. The Ranger guys had already come and picked up everybody for the RIP class. So me and my whole company like basically missed that. So I spent 3 weeks in RIP holdover, additional to 3 weeks of RIP and everything else. We're just kind of tired of like living out of a D bag.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can go right across, like I can see the barracks where I'll live, and I know what's here. I know the town. I can pick it because surely nobody's going to pick to be at Benning, and that's how it happened.
So
Cool. Yeah.
So you did your time there. You went and you were in Bravo Company.
Yeah. So I didn't. Again, like going back to the whole rumor and innuendo and everything else, we could see they didn't have a brown fence up on the side of Third Bat that was connected to where the RIP barracks were, and
Okay.
RIP and Pre-Ranger were like in the same barracks, I guess. And we could see the different companies out and about. And I remember seeing B Company was out doing some kind of training, but they had Zodiac boats and all kinds of stuff. And so word was like, they're the waterborne company. It was like totally not factual. But, I saw that and I was like, man, I hope I go to B Company. It just came out of nowhere. And anyway, we got into like, once we graduated with RIP, we got marched over to 3rd Battalion, and they sat us in chairs and they were like, okay, this row is A Company, this row is B Company, that row is C Company. And I was just in the row that was B Company. And that's how it ended up. But
So how, and you ended up going to war with Ranger Regiment with Bravo Company, and then you ended up going on to Special Mission Unit. I guess just talk us through a little bit of what was going on, as far as you saying, hey, I'm going to go do the long walk, or I'm going to go do the selection, how that transpired.
Well, I think, again, kind of being moronic to the whole, here's how things work and here's how, I guess when I went and talked to the recruiter, I was basically signing up to be in the NFL, and I like to use the football analogy just because people understand it. Generally speaking, people understand football, pro football versus college versus high school, etc. And I didn't realize at the time, but, came to realize that I can't go play in the NFL until I play Pee Wee football, and then maybe I'll graduate to high school ball. But like, you've got to be a star every step of the way just to get to the NFL. And then once you get to the NFL, using the football analogy, it's like, how many dudes are in the NFL that you've never heard of? Thousands. And they're there for a year, they're there for 6 months, they're there for 2 or 3 years or whatever, and then they're gone. And then you realize the guys that maintain and build a brand and become, super successful and superstars, like that's a completely different level. So I guess when I look back on those times, I think I didn't necessarily recognize it or something that I would have said to myself out loud, at least in my head, but I recognize that like I've got to be a performer here before I can even think about going anywhere else. So all I can do is focus on right now, today, and just being the best that I can be at what I'm doing. Like, yeah, maybe I'll get there. It's going to take a long time, and there'll be little steps along the way that I've got to take, but I can't just go to the NFL. I've got to put in all the time and sacrifice and do all that before, I can get there.
Yeah.
So I did well there. I excelled, with my peers and everything else. And the crew of guys that went to Mogadishu, we all kind of ended up being standouts just because you think, back then it was a peacetime military, man. There was no war. And we got back from that, and it was almost like, hey, just because you guys did this thing, just remember that still the important shit is how shiny your boots are and how, squared away your haircut is. Like, that's being a real soldier, and you're like, dude, we need to be doing this kind of training. We need to be, there was a disparity and probably a lot of professional jealousy and all kinds of other stuff that played into that. But if anything, going to Mogadishu definitely solidified that, hey, I want to go to Delta. That's where I'd like to ultimately end up. Just seeing those guys, the way they operated, not like necessarily tactically operated, but just being smart about everything, being well equipped. Definitely a tribe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like what was the timeline on that, right? So you're what, 1990 when you kind of went through RIP and Airborne, or 91, and then
Early 91. So I got to the Rangers in April of 91. That's when I got assigned to B Company. And I think it was like the 28th or 26th, something like that, of April. So I got there. Within a year, had gone to Ranger School and started to become a team leader type. Where now you're in charge of privates and you're trying to get the younger guys squared away and up to speed, things like that. And I told my leadership right before we went to the training exercise that we would leave from to go to Mogadishu. I told my leadership that I wanted to go to the recon detachment and try out for that. And so they kind of like sidelined me in terms of upward mobility because they were planning on me leaving in October of 93 to go to the recon detachment. So Mogadishu happened, and because my platoon had taken like basically the brunt of the casualties
Mm-hmm.
Of the battle, I felt like, hey, it would be not in good taste, for me to leave soon thereafter to try and do something else. Let me help rebuild. Let me help, impart some wisdom and knowledge on some of the newer guys. And then when I feel like we've kind of rebuilt and regathered to where we're, back to mission capable and everything else, then I'll go to selection for the recon detachment. So that's what I did. I got to, I went through, if you want to call it a selection process, it was pretty lame. I went to that in, I think, May of 95, and then ended up on a recon team June of 95.
Okay.
that's so in through that process, right? We talked a little bit with some other guests, like the evolution of tactics and training. Did you see that? I mean, the guys that were in Panama, through the time, early years in the Ranger Regiment, after Mogadishu, like, what was the evolution of Ranger Regiment and Battalion from that perspective? Did you see much of that, or was it still?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. So when I got to the Ranger Battalion in April of 91, the majority of people there that were senior to me all had, at a minimum, like a combat scroll and a combat jump.
Mm-hmm.
So there were even PFCs that were still, untabbed specialists that had CIBs, combat jump, and combat scrolls. And, I looked up to those guys because they had been and done it and, kind of understood that that was an airfield seizure. And Mogadishu was a completely, urban combat, sustained urban combat to some degree. And, I felt like the way forward is less patrolling, woods, tactics, that type of thing, and more about, hey, if we're supporting Delta on the battlefield, these are the things that we need to do to be good at that. And so I think that as a company, we did a really good job of trying to keep up with that. The training exercises that we did were very much, hey, we're going to go secure this for these guys to come in and do this other thing, that type of stuff. So I think we were really smart about it. And that's where I say, I feel like between us and the other companies, the other Ranger first sergeants in 3rd Battalion were kind of like, hey, those guys, fuck them. They got to go do this thing. But like, this is real Rangering, is about, the haircut, shiny boots, and all that jazz. So there was really a lot of disparity amongst the groups, and that almost, I would say that it probably stayed all the way up until GY.
Yeah.
And interestingly, when I get to go back to Fort Benning and hang with some of those guys, like B Company 3rd Ranger Battalion, man, it's got some history. And it's interesting to see that they really take their legacy. They beat it into the new guys' heads. They understand where they're serving, and they're everything that came before them, and they really do a good job with that. So I call it America's company.
There you go. There you go.
Indeed. And so you did some time with Recon after that, and then you went. You weren't a long tab, are you? You're a ranger and then an operator.
Yeah, ranger operator. Then I went to the Q course. So
you
I
did
get my tab later. Yeah.
Okay.
So
the Bravo Q course.
No, that's a longer story.
Okay. All right.
So I did the recon thing, and when I first got there, it was very much the old school Panama kind of format. And what was happening at the time, so starting in about 95, was Bosnia. And there was very little vision as far as like, okay, how do we take the Ranger Regiment from Vietnam patrolling type of legacy and morph them into a more urban combat, low visibility type of force. And we had an exercise, and I can't mention all of the assets that we were utilizing and things like that. But we had a training exercise, and we weren't able to utilize some of the things that we could have been able to utilize had we not been hut, high and tight haircuts, that type of thing. And the regimental commander at the time was a guy named Colonel Azinski, and he approached the regimental S2 and said, I want Ranger eyes on Ranger targets. I don't care what you got to do to make this more current and relevant, but I want that to happen. And I want to say that was in like 1996. So by 1997, maybe somewhere late in 96, I don't remember. Maybe by 97, the regimental S2 spoke to the detachment, the recon detachment commander, and was like, look, this is what needs to happen. And I think he fired through maybe 3 or 4 commanders because these guys didn't have the vision. They were kind of like, hey, I know Ranger patrolling and I know, that stuff, but I don't really understand this new battle space. So the regimental S2 came to the detachment and said, I need 3 dudes that have some vision and understand where this place needs to go to get it more current and relevant. Who wants to volunteer to be a part of stepping up, this new thing, whatever it is? And I was like, yeah, I'll do that. So I put together, I think their selection course that they still run to this day, I basically, as a staff sergeant, built that with the help of unit psychologists and other folks, and validated it and did all that. I helped put together what became, like, they call it RTC, the Reconnaissance Training Course. So it needed to be legitimized by way of a formal selection process, understanding who you were selecting, why you were trying to select an individual. So maybe less rigid and someone who could be operational in a more ambiguous environment, that type of thing. And anyway, and then put together a legitimate training course. So a guy isn't in B Company 3rd Bat one day, and then now he's a recon specialist and doing low vis ops. Like, that shit doesn't work. So anyway, as a part of that, I got sent over to Bosnia and got to work with some unit dudes over there and see what they were doing and see what they had going on. And they all, to include the commander who was over there at the time, said, hey, you need to be a selection in the fall. And so that's when I went, and I got selected.
Wow.
So that was fall of 98.
Okay.
Wow.
So you went fall of 98, and then the rest of your career was with the unit, and you operated in both Iraq and Afghanistan as far as GWAT went, right?
And other places.
And
sure.
Well,
Right.
And other places.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that even at the beginning of the war, I think about when McChrystal was the commander, some of the stuff that we saw. I think that's when the Rangers all were able to have long hair, and they went a little off path, I guess. when he was in there. What's
It's
that?
interesting because I've been having this conversation a lot lately with some of my. I don't talk with a ton of guys from the old Ranger days, but
Uh-huh.
there are a handful of guys that I just, still keep in touch with and things like that. But the conversation is, twofold. Was it harder back then? And harder doesn't necessarily mean better. It just means it was harder. And then also kind of like where things have evolved to, and
Mm-hmm.
what does that look like now? And it's a interesting conversation because you find yourself almost sounding like your dad, where it's like, oh, back when I was, I don't want to sound that way, right? Um, but there are some things that I see that I wish, maybe there was still a little bit of some of the old school there because some of the stuff I see. I was about to do a post today on Instagram about this, and it's a video of, and I'll post it later today, but it's a video of a pair of Adidas boots that I got when I got the Delta Force. And there was a time in the military where you didn't get to roll up your sleeves, you didn't get to unblouse your boots, you didn't get to have long hair, you didn't get to do anything, have a button unbuttoned or anything else. You had to earn that shit. And it took me 8 years to earn the right to be able to do that stuff. And they basically hand that to a brand new private who shows up in Ranger Battalion today. And I won't say that it's a good thing or a bad thing because I don't really know. I'm not serving there, so I don't know if it's a good thing because they're doing things smarter, or if it's kind of giving up something that I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say what's good or bad, right? I mean, it's certainly an evolution. Yeah, I mean, the focusing on the details, right, is what it's the discipline, right, of learning discipline. But at the same time, there's also, a different op tempo, right? Or at least there was during the prime years of GWAT, right? There was a lot of deployments, and so you weigh some of the decompression components of it, or feeling special. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's
Yeah, and we're spending a lot more time on communication or the Army. I got out in 2006, so I got out right before everything had gone electronic. And I look at some of the training they have to do, online training, that in the past, if it was important training, the unit would go and they'd all sit down and have a brief, right? So they had to make time for that. Now, it seems like a lot of times, instead of you going home and making sure your uniform's pressed or your boots are shined, the focus is on making sure your online training is up there, and you know what's going on with the Army. So
Right.
so there is this. It's really a societal change that influences how we're operating there. But to be prepared for combat, I mean, I kind of go back to that same thing that. Am I this old curmudgeon, or are we doing things that is our focus in a different place than where it should be? And here on the podcast, we think a lot about where we came from, and those experiences that we had, the things that we learned, and how we're able to apply those now. So when you sit there and you say, well, I don't know, we like to focus on what we did learn and how that kind of shaped us to where we are today and what we're doing. So yeah, I mean, the question's always going to be there. Is it better today, or is it, and applying the right metric with the change of the entire battle space and everything. That's really, I guess that's a difficult thing to assess to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that there's anything tangible, that you can say this versus that.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I would say absolutely it was harder back then in that we were ignorant and we didn't know what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, I mean, even just take physical activity and going out and running every day. And if a private fell out of a run, you were going to go do remedial running after lunch. You know what I mean? Like, talk about being completely broken down, not any real recovery, not any real rest, and just smoking dudes all day. But it was out of ignorance. So that's why I say definitely harder, because I feel like we were more ignorant. We didn't really understand, and we were kind of tied to this, this is the way we've always done it thing. I think in terms of the way I remember it was attention to detail is what's going to save your life in combat. That was kind of how it was framed up. And I think through these conversations with my buddies more recently, I think the way I've kind of reinterpreted it, and I think it would have maybe connected with me a little bit more back in the day if I had heard this, it taught me to be the best at everything that I had to do. Mm-hmm. So if it means we got to buff the hallway, like I've got to do that to the best of my ability, or, that team leader is going to make me pay for it for, until it gets redone for, the 18th time in the middle of the night, whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. If I've got to have my uniform squared away, I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. If I'm in charge of the company area and there's fucking weeds growing all over the place, like I'm going to make sure that it's beautiful. You know what I mean? So I didn't necessarily subscribe to the whole, keeping my boots super shined is going to make me better in combat. I didn't subscribe to that at all. But what I do see is we allow, or it's allowed, that things just run amok. And then it's kind of like, well, we're busy. We don't have time for that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I would argue that, well, there's always time, for that to some degree.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a saying that was kind of made famous during my time, and it was, they train you, it pays to be a winner, right? And what does that mean, right? So whether that's physical, right? Do you need remedial physical training? Is that, how you dress? And of course, after we got out of basic, we didn't have black boots anymore, but, are you clean? Are you groomed? Is your buddy squared away, right? Because it pays to be a winner, but we have to win together, right? So all of those things combined is what's going to make your operational success, right? So,
sure,
yeah. So I guess we won't go into details. We spent a lot of time talking about your military time, but like as an operator in SMU or Delta, like what's a memory or a cool story you want to share?
Man, there are probably too many. I like to talk about the things that, like, the team that I was on, as an example, like me and two other guys were on the same team. So three of us were on the same team together for like 5 years. And, if you think about how well you get to know people and how they're going to respond or react, or, how things on target go, based on, how close knit this team is. But I think the stuff that really stands out to me was our ability to be able to do things, high stress environment, extremely high stress environment, very ambiguous problems being thrown at us, and our ability to kind of have fun still. Shit's going sideways on target. We're still like, screwing around and having fun, and not that we're not being serious, but it was almost like, you start to perceive time and things differently, because your brain is reacting and responding to things so quickly. You see things like, I've done training stuff, not like my own training, but seen other groups training. I've been asked to go witness, law enforcement agencies, like, hey, we know that you were at Delta for 12 years, and we'd love to see anything that you can point out to help us do better. How can we become better and more efficient, and things like that. And the big mistake is like CQB. It's very apparent because we did a whole lot of that stuff. And see a group like run into a room, and then everybody kind of stands around because they don't really know what to do next. But they think because they're moving fast that they're like fast at CQB. And I would think about like my actions as a 2IC on target, come into the room, grabbing a snapshot, clearing my sector. I've got a chem light out, dropping it in the doorway, already identified the next breach, grabbing the breacher, moving him over to there. You know, it's like all this stuff that's happening. And really, CQB is, it's like a thinking man's game. It's complex problem solving on the move.
Yeah.
And anyway, not that that has anything to do with anything, but those are just things that stand out to me when I think about like what Delta does, how it does it so well. It's that it just masters the basics, and it's looking for people that they use the term cognitive dexterity, right? Which is a fancy word for just problem solving, you know, thinking on your feet and being able to figure out solutions. So anyway.
you take all these experiences, and there's so many. If you stop and look at what drove you to join the military, the route that you took, and how you ended up in your career, and now you're in the music space. Can you talk a little bit about that transition, and what drew you into that, and even building out a band?
Or was it? I mean, did you continue your music from throughout your military career too?
Yeah.
Right? Like what did that look like?
Yeah, so I played music when I joined. Kind of got rid of all my stuff, and was like, yeah, fuck it. You know, now I'm doing something else, and kind of quickly recognized that, you know, hey, I still love music, and still it's a huge part of me and who I am. And so it started to kind of recollect equipment and guitars and things like that. And so it always was a part of me. Wasn't until like maybe 2007-ish where I kind of started getting back into music and was playing in bands in Fayetteville that kind of got to the point where it's like now I'm in one of the more well-known bands in Fayetteville, and we're opening for all the national acts that come through and things like that. So it really kind of started there. Through other stuff that I do, like I am able to contribute, you know, pretty significantly to different organizations that help, whether it's unit scholarship fund type of things or whatever. But it's not my personal finances. It's not my personal contribution. And every Friday, my wife and I would go out and have a couple of cocktails and get dinner and things like that. And I would tell my wife, you know, I feel like I'm a ship out on the ocean, as corny as this sounds. I feel like I'm a ship and I'm just looking for the spotlight. Like, just tell me what to do. How can I help? I don't want to stand up a foundation. I don't want to deal with money and having to be, you know, asking people for money to do something. And every week we would talk about this type of thing. Like, it wasn't so much a loss of purpose or a loss of identity or that for me. It was more like, how can I contribute? What can I do? And one day she came into this room in the house and she was like, man, it's a shame that you're not doing something with all this stuff. Like, you play guitar all the time, but it's just kind of a shame that you're not doing anything with it. And the next day, it didn't hit me. The next day, I was driving into Manhattan to meet up with my buddy Jason Everman, who was the guy that was in Nirvana and Soundgarden before he joined the Army in 1994. And he and I were going to see a concert together. And all of a sudden, it just clicked. And I was like, man, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to start a band, and we'll take our proceeds, you know, music royalties or whatever, and give those to charitable organizations that help veterans and first responders and something along those lines. So I approached Jason about it before the concert, and he was like, yeah, man, I'm down. You know, I didn't know where it was going to go, what it was going to grow into. Started an Instagram page and basically tried to get out the word through Instagram. I don't know how you do that real well, but former MARSOC officer Tyson, our bass player, he hit me up kind of out of the blue, like, hey man, I don't know what you got going on, but like, I want to be a part of it. Like, well, do you play an instrument? Yeah, I play the bass. Like, all right, cool. Let's meet up and see if this is right. And it just kind of organically grew. It grew to the point where our producer, our first album producer, Josh Goodwin, who's a former Marine, he reached out to me and said, you know, hey, I don't ever offer this, but I'll produce you guys' first album if that's something you'd be interested in. I'm like, who the hell's this guy? You know, I hit Google, and I'm like, oh damn, man, this is like one of the biggest producers in the music industry. So
Wow.
it just kind of started from there, and you know, yeah.
So what is it that you're doing now, or is I guess kind of talk a little bit about Silence and Light and your overall vision and what you've got lined up for the next 12 months.
Sure. So I'm not sure when this will air, but we'll be recording the second album in Raleigh, North Carolina, starting the 27th of July through maybe the second or third week of August. And that'll basically take us until November, probably release that in November timeframe. So people can look for it then. Our first album is out. It's on every music platform known to man. If you Google Silence and Light, you'll find all kinds of stuff there. So, you know, what I try and explain to people is 100% of the music royalties we earn from streaming and from sales, and obviously we earn a lot more music royalties from sales than we do from streaming. So if people want to contribute, the best way for them to do that is to buy the music through iTunes or something along those lines. I think we have CDs on Amazon and things like that. But if they don't want to pay for that, whether they know it or not, they're contributing to mainly to Warrior's Heart, which is the group that we've kind of elected to not partner with, but say, you know, hey, we believe in what they're doing and who they're helping. It's not just special operations people. It's not just military people. It's first responders. It could be nurses that dealt with thousands of COVID deaths and all that type of thing. So the thing that I love about Warrior's Heart is that they use art as a form of therapy. So they have, legitimate detox and getting people clean, because a lot of PTSD people think about as like this flashback that you see in the movie, but it's usually a big ball of poor activity and poor behavior involving alcohol and drugs and all kinds of other things. Sometimes not, but they help get people clean. They do PTSD counseling, and then they have this art therapy, and it could be anything. It could be sculpting, it could be writing, it could be painting, it could be, you name it, poetry. And that really spoke to me because I know what playing the guitar does for me. It's just kind of flow state, I don't think about anything. And it's probably one of the only things that I can do where my brain isn't going a million miles an hour trying to crack a nut or something, But anyway, so we really believed in that. Initially, the plan was each band member would kind of have their different charitable organization, and we would contribute to multiple charitable organizations. And it kind of quickly turned into, I'm the only person that's doing any sort of media and things like that. And I kept talking about the same thing over and over again. So why are we going to try and contribute to stuff that we can't really even talk about or share? So that's why we ended up with Warrior's Heart.
Yeah, it's a great organization. It's we're here in San Antonio, so we're familiar. Was Tom one of your teammates, or do you know Tom from the organization?
I knew Tom. We were in different squadrons, and I think I was senior to him by a few years, I think. But yeah, I knew him there, and he and I crossed paths several times, before he stood up Warrior's Heart, when he was kind of working on all of that, and got to see some of it firsthand. And I've also, I had people reach out to me whenever I do something, podcast related or article, interview, any of that, and I mention Warrior's Heart, people will reach out through social media and say, hey, I went there. That place is amazing. I wish that they could open another facility. I wish that, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, it's just something I believe in. Known Tom for a long time. He's a great dude, great American. And yeah, we feel strongly about it.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you jumping into this conversation with us today. And we kind of started out, I think, a little bit more talking about that desire to be part of a team. A lot of times when we're talking to people, they'll talk about their military career, and then that experience in being part of a team and focus on different things and translating that into where they are. But that was kind of, you brought a different perspective to the conversation today, and I mean, I think that's in all of our desires, really, and that's what pulls us into the organizations that we're part of, is being that team player. And there's so much that goes into it. Most people, we wouldn't sit and have this conversation about their military career, but talking about the things that drove you from one step to the next step, and having that recognition of what was necessary, it almost sounds like that's what kind of brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, I didn't stand this thing up to be like a famous dude or to be Instagram famous or any of that. I decided to kind of become public because it was the only way to say, hey, I've been there. I've lived the real stuff. And if I don't put my resume out there to some degree, who is this guy? I want to be shady about where I served or any of that stuff. It's like, no, here's where I served. Here's what I did. Here are the things that I was a part of. And if I can do this, the bigger point is, if I can do this and figure out a way to feel like I'm contributing and giving back to the community that I came from, if I can do it, then anybody can do it. And, I've lived the dark times too, lived through horrific shit. One of the things I like to talk about is, war is a part of loss that you experience in the military. But I know, as an example, far more dudes that have died either from suicide or training accidents or murder suicide even. Like, I know far more people that have died from that than died in the line of battle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And the only thing that's going to fix the community is the community. It's not the Army's responsibility to fix you. They fight wars. They train people, equip them. It's not to make you feel good when you leave, or any of that stuff. So the only thing that's going to fix you is you, and the only thing that's going to fix the veteran community is the veteran community.
Yeah. Yeah. As we're interviewing folks, and the focus of the podcast is AfterSOF, right? Like, and I think all of us can, at least the feedback we're getting, right, is that we hate to use this word transition, but right, like people are getting out or have gotten out and are trying to find the next phase of their life. It's interesting to see people take different approaches. And for you, music or art as a form of sort of the next phase from the amazing career that you had is a really good example for folks to kind of get out of their comfort zone, go find something that gives them new purpose, new meaning, and not be afraid to go do it.
Yeah, I recognize that it's a part of who I am. It's not who I am today, and that's one of the things. Like, I would much rather be sitting on here talking about music stuff for the entire time. It's not, hey, let me rehash my career and talk about my accomplishments. That's not fun to me.
Yeah.
But I recognize that there's a part of that that's who I am, and that's part of our story and where we've come from and everything else. So it's not what defines me today, but it's a part of who I am today.
Yeah. Well, and it's, someone like yourself with your resume, right, is people will listen to it, right? And so I think that's an important piece of this community focus, is that we got to talk about it, right? We've got to take the veil off and put away some of our fears of speaking out. And so appreciate you doing this, because people will listen to you, and that's important.
Absolutely. And I think I said this to one of you guys when we were on the phone the other day, but I don't care if I reach one person, then that's great. It doesn't have to be like I'm on Joe Rogan talking to 10 million people. If I can reach one person and help one person kind of figure some stuff out, then it's all worth it. Some of the unintended stuff that I've seen, it's kind of unreal because I set a goal for the band and just kind of what I wanted it to be able to do. And I felt like if we could get 5,000 people behind us and, download the album, that would be success. That would be pretty awesome. And it's done so much beyond that. It's not even funny.
Awesome.
From following on social media, that's huge, to, all kinds of stuff. But to see how many people are listening weekly, to be able to see all the analytics of stuff, to see that we've reached like worldwide. The second part of it is the kids that reach out, or younger guys that reach out that say, man, you're an inspiration, to what I want to become, or these words that you said that I heard through such and such really spoke to me and it helped me through a bad time, to this song that you wrote. It just hits me. And then I hear that song and like a tear rolls down my cheek because it speaks that heavily to me. Those weren't things that I was necessarily expecting. It was kind of like, all right, we go in and do this album, and if we get 5,000 people, that would be great. But
Right.
it just it's really cool to see where it's come, and I'm super appreciative of everybody that's helped. I mean, it's a monster, from people that do graphic design for us, the people that have done videos, to everybody that's involved in the whole process and everything else. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to sharing this with everybody and letting them know what you and Silence and Light, and hopefully we can help guide people to Warrior's Heart as well if they need some help.
Yeah.
Absolutely, man. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah. Thanks, Brad.
Thanks.
It was awesome.
Appreciate it.